Public Works. Could we stand for the pledge? A moment of silence afterwards. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All the board members are here. The mayor's here, our general manager is here, our legal counsel's here via Zoom. So we got that going. Do I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we're in executive session. Back in open session. We're on item 4, open forum, general discussion of wastewater system management. And hopefully we have representatives of Infomark on the line. Mike, we're good on mute too. Are we going to see Mike too, or just?
It's up to him.
He's
Got to click on his video to click it
I
on.
never offering to come in.
Yeah.
No, we have his office calling.
I don't see him yet.
I don't think so.
Mike, can you hear us? I mean, that Mike. The other Mike, the operator Mike.
Well, both mics.
I can hear you.
Mike Walden. Yeah. There you go. There he is. Can't see him.
I can't see you, but we know you're there.
He's back.
Yeah, I'm working on unmuting here or turning my video on.
You're backlit too much by your windows.
Your video's on, but
Okay.
Your windows provide obscure you.
All right, just give me a sec.
yeah.
There he is.
Oh, good.
All right, sorry about that, guys.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
Mike, do you want to go over briefly and just, I think the board pretty much understands what happened on the 13th through, I guess, the 16th or 15th. If you want to make any comments about that, please go ahead, and you may have some questions from the board.
Okay, so we talked about the last meeting. You know, we had the issue with pump 1. That was Friday morning, late morning. We found out pump 1 wasn't pumping. We checked that pump station every day. Tried to pulled the pump apart to make sure that there wasn't a clog in up top, and there wasn't. You know, determined that the clog was down in the suction well. So at that time, I'd called United Rental to order a pump, a diesel pump to have on standby, and we had received that pump around 5:30 Friday evening. At that point, we decided not to install the pump and to leave it staged at the wastewater plant. And then early Sunday morning on the 15th, we received approximately 2.5 inches of rain in less than 3 hours, and had high levels in several pump stations that discharged into pump station 4. The one pump couldn't keep up. At that time, Richard Plack was on call, and he had called BPW to assist in getting the bypass pump hooked up. The bypass pump was hooked up later that morning, and by 4:30 ish, or we had the level return to normal, and the pump was keeping up. Several hours later, that pump failed. Coupling broke on a diesel pump, and that pump failed, and that's what led to the backup later on the 15th, where we discharged from the gravity system, discharged into the canal. We did a root cause analysis, and do you guys want me to go through it, or would you like to ask any questions related to the root cause analysis? It's still in draft form. We're still, we had a discussion with representatives of BPW yesterday, and we are still haven't finalized our root cause analysis.
The board has seen a copy of that draft. We discussed some of the issues that came up yesterday in our discussion with you. So if the board members are okay, we'll just have them ask questions from this. Do you want him to go through all this again, or would you be okay just starting asking your questions?
Just start asking questions.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, because Tom and I have pretty much exhausted ours. Go ahead. Richard, do you want to start?
Well, from the draft report that I read, there was something about a 57% increase in flow, which I don't know where that came from. That number,
And that was a question that Preston had brought up, and I'm going to go back and get some numbers, but that was based on when we left as Severn Trent back in 2017. I believe BPW was taking some of the county's flow, but not as much as it is now. So those numbers were off the top of my head. We had discussed it earlier in a meeting with Darren and Austin, and I recalled we had used those numbers, but I'm going to go back and get the actual data and produce a more accurate number.
Richard, to your point, the county flow, and Mike just chiming in, the county flow wasn't hooked up until 2019. That was when that project had actually happened, where we were accepting from the force main that turned into the gravity into pump station 4. That was finalized in 2019. So the data from Severn Trent was just our flows, where we had peak flows in the summertime, but then we didn't have the normalization throughout the winter. So you would spike up in the summer and then spike down in the winter.
And one of the things that was discussed yesterday, and Mike's going to look at, is annual versus seasonal, because those two numbers will greatly skew that percentage. So, I think we're just waiting for more data from Infomart to understand.
I have a question. My biggest concern really is the ability of staff to respond to a problem.
Understood, and that's our main priority right now, is to get back to fully staffed, and it's been difficult. We talked about those difficulties yesterday. We do have 3 full-time employees, a part-time weekend employee on staff. We made an offer to another gentleman who's in background check right now, who should be starting in approximately 2 weeks. We've been bringing down a mechanic from Elkton 3 days a week to help out with preventive maintenance, and and to help out at the plant, run the press, the sludge press, and things like that. And I've been spending about half my time at the wastewater plant.
So there was an alarm system that was turned off at the pumping station. And if I understand this correctly, so when you look at the flow coming into the wastewater treatment plant, you could see that there was diminished water coming in from pump station 4. Is that correct?
That's correct. I could see where, you know, when the diesel pump was pumping, it pumped down, you know, it was pumping for a long period of time, and then it shut down. We didn't. So
Would it make sense to have an alarm in the wastewater treatment plant so that if the flow is diminished, that you would know that?
currently, I mean, so we have 2 pump stations that pump into into the plant, and that's pump station 8 and pump station 4. There are periods of time overnight where neither pump station is pumping. So it's normal that every day, you know, that the influent flow would drop to 0 at some points in time. And that's where the EQ tank, that's why the EQ tank is necessary in this system, the equalization tank. So I could look at the graph and see that the graph looked off, and that's how I determined it. But it would be difficult to put that alarm in.
So in hindsight, turning off the alarm at pump station 4, which I get from an electrical perspective, but having that location unmanned for that time, I assume is something we would not consider again in the future.
Correct.
When you look at some of your other operations, what kind of response times, how far people do they tend to live away from a plant? And in particular, if you look at our location where it's beach traffic, right? There's times that I don't want to drive to Dover or back. It's taking me over an hour and a half to drive to Dover. How do you guys look at response times, and what metrics? How should we think about those metrics?
As per our employee handbook, it's an hour that an employee has to be able to be on site within an hour of receiving a call.
Then that by definition then can't happen, right? From Elkton, Maryland, from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, or
I mean, you know, understanding that those are not permanent employees, we, you know, where the employees that we hire, you know, must live within 35 to 40 minutes of the plant. That's, you know, and, you know, I think everybody understands that we were understaffed during this period of time, and that, you know, is, you know, one of the major root causes of this incident.
So the 3 individuals that are full-time at the plant, where do they live?
Richard lives in Seaford. Paul lives right by Indian River,
Ocean View. He lives in Ocean View.
Ocean View. And I'm not sure where Kurt lives. I think I'm not as familiar with the area as you guys. It's Milford or Georgetown, I believe. But he's around 40 minutes away from the plant.
An hour then.
So the three full-time employees are reasonably located.
Two operators and then one that's pursuing operator's license.
Right.
Any follow-up questions, Aaron?
so the communication package that you guys developed, have you guys reviewed that recently? And is there any need for any changes to that, especially around communications and those things?
I'm sorry, Earl. Communications package. I'm not.
There's a communication sector in some of the packages that were developed around what happens when something happens, similar to this incident. Have you guys reviewed those documents, and were you compliant with those documents that you developed yourself during this incident?
We haven't, as far as the SOPs that we called out, we have those are not have not been produced yet.
Okay, I think that could be helpful to understand if you're in line with those requirements.
Yeah, no, that's on our list of things to get squared away and to update the ERP, the emergency action plan.
Like when this occurred, the problem occurred, it didn't seem like you knew what DENREC's requirements were for responding, or am I wrong there? It seemed
No, I
like-
think that was a question about whether they come out for a certain amount, and that was, I mean, well, no, you're correct. I mean, myself did not understand. Richard, who's been a Delaware licensed operator for much longer than I have been, did understand, but there was confusion. He was on vacation. My understanding of the 5-day report was from Pennsylvania, where we are required to submit a 5-day report also, but it's less of a formalized communication. It can be by email. And when we submitted the timeline with the facts and the amount discharged, I was under the understanding that we met that requirement.
Shouldn't Paul also understand it? If he's
Yeah.
not-
Paul was out for the weekend. Paul was off for the weekend. So, and I mean, that Paul may understand that, but I mean, as far as consulting with him, I mean, that's more along the lines of, that's generally a management function. So I'm not sure if Paul was aware of that, but I did not consult with Paul during that time when Richard was out.
So speaking on behalf of InfoMark, if you were to do things different, what things would you do different?
We would have had to bypass pump hooked up Friday night. Is my if we called in Godwin instead of United Rental, Godwin would have helped us set up the pump. I was not aware of that. Where we have a preferred contract or services agreement with United Rental. I was not aware that Godwin would send a crew to help set up the pump. That would have been what I would have done. And had that done Friday night when the pump was delivered.
So would you use a different, I'm just trying to understand, would you use a different provider? Is that what you're suggesting?
I would, to get the pump hooked up, yes, directly. I mean, yes, I mean, we would have the pump hooked up right away Friday night. Regardless of whether we would have used another contractor or brought people in to do it.
Anything else from a communication perspective or a process perspective that you would have done differently?
Yeah, I mean, we should have let Austin know of the situation immediately on Friday, and and that all falls on me. And if I couldn't secure a person to stay there over the weekend to be a backup for Richard, then I would have, at least let Austin know and see if just ensure that he knew and could potentially use BPW to back us up.
And I'm just trying to understand, I apologize. I'm the least technical person here by a long shot. So when it comes to let Austin know, was that for him to have someone at the location? I'm just trying to understand what the requirement would have been for Austin.
Just as good communication, him having an understanding that what the situation was, him be involved in decision making.
And I think Austin was on site for almost 24 hours at one point. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yeah, I was on there till about 5 a.m. Sunday. Went home, slept for 3 hours, went outside, did yard work, came back in about 1:30, 2 o'clock, and then I was here till about 11.
So the question is, why did you sleep 3 hours? So you talked about a bypass pump being, from somebody else, not from the provider that we had. And then you talked about communications with Austin. Any other things that if we could magically do this over that we would do?
I would ensure that I had staffing there. I would have stayed myself, or which I should have done, or got somebody there to stay the weekend.
So is that when the alarms got turned off, you would have had someone be there for that period of time, or is this after that?
Definitely would have had somebody be there. I mean, Richard was up all night. He was there, same as Austin, up all night. He had left. I had talked to him in the morning. I said, I'm leaving to come down there. And at that time, he had finished up what he needed to do at the plant and left. But that was, made an assumption, which is the worst thing to do in this business, and that pump was to continue running, and it didn't.
Is there any technical solution? And I get that the electricity was turned off for all the right reasons. Is there something different that we can do technically, or that can be done to make sure that there's, belts and suspenders, to use those words? Other than just having someone there, which I think would have been a great idea as well, by the way.
When I got, later that day on Sunday, we turned all the critical equipment that was submerged, turned the breakers off to all that equipment, and then, turned the main power back on to the pump station. So we had the controls and the alarms back on.
Mike, the rental pumps that you got, do they have a sensor of any time, or do they just run flat out all the time? And isn't there a sensor for them?
They have float switches, just an on-off float switch, or there's two floats just on-off. So they don't have a high level alarm. You can rent, as an option to come with those. You can get a cellular auto dialer, that you could hook a high alarm into, but that we didn't foresee, that being required.
I guess the answer should have been having somebody there, so you wouldn't need either.
Correct.
So when you guys did the initial assessment of the plant prior to bidding, would you have done something different along those lines?
The due diligence prior to bidding for the contract.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should have went to every pump station, which we didn't. That's one thing. I mean, it's difficult to assess the condition of the headworks. That when we did the bidding, when we did our walkthrough, there were only 7 sludge drying beds, and the other 3 had been added between the time that we did our due diligence walkthrough and when we resumed talks to there was a long delay there with dealing with the other contractor's contract.
Thank you. Richard.
The report mentioned that prior to April of 2021, there was no indication of clogging, but that the clogging was noticed at that point in time. What was it that was noticed that and what was done during that 3 to 4 month period for this pumping station?
One of the issues that we determined was that pump 1 was getting clogged and pump 2 wasn't. So pump 1 all of a sudden started frequently getting clogged. We had the entire wet well cleaned. An outside contractor came in and cleaned it. After that time, shortly after that time, pump 1 got clogged again. We were able to, we had to bypass pump there at that time, so we were able to pump it down and utilize BPW's back truck to clean the wet well again, 2 or 3 weeks after we had it cleaned the first time. We determined that because the influent pipe was pointed directly at the suction pipe for pump 1, was pushing, the flow was pushing all the rags towards pump 1. So at that time we decided to run pump 2 as the lead and have pump 1 as the lag. We also had a discussion with Darren about, that this is a remaining issue. I did report in the BPW meeting that this was our strategy. And, we hadn't done anything to pursue fixing the wet well after that. I mean, it's more of, somewhat of an engineering, the way that the pump 1 is piped up. Well, both pumps have 2 90s. They're not sweep 90s. It's not necessarily ideal under the circumstances, an ideal setup. So, I mean, we notified BPW of the issue, but the way that we were running, pump 1 would only come on in a high flow situation. And, generally there's going to be a lot more head in a high flow situation, and, the pump would be less likely to clog.
Is that what happened on August the 13th?
I'm not sure. It wasn't a high flow situation. I'm not sure why that pump came on. But when I walked into the pump station to check the station, both pumps were on, and pump 1 wasn't pumping.
And just to follow up with that, we're having discussions with GMB for solutions at that pump station. One with the ragging, we looked at a possible aeration system, which would basically continually move all of the rags that would be coming through, all the effluent that's in there. And then also taking a look at the elbows. So as it comes out of the pump and goes through the dry well concrete wall at 90s down, goes down to the bottom of the wet well, and then 90s again, eliminating the 90 at the bottom and also putting some sort of clean out through a use of a T would help allow for any clogging to be easily handled by a jet truck like ours, instead of a more invasive clean everything all the way down to the bottom so that we can get it. Because the only way that you can do it is you actually have to plug the line, the inlet coming into the wet well to be able to draw it down enough to do any sort of work on the 90s.
Thank you.
Just, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's up.
Oh, just 2 more things. Had the county not been there to back you guys up and us up, would it have been a lot worse, do you think?
If the count, could you repeat that, Earl? I'm sorry.
Not there to back us up with trucks, with pumps and those kinds of things, would that spill have been a lot worse, do you think?
What the county did for the most part was we pulled from the pump station 3 wet well. So pump station 3 out at the marina is a bigger pump station that several of the smaller pump stations out there discharge into. We had turned pump station 3 off to alleviate the flow from pump station 4, and pump station 3 has a rather large collection system. So allowing that to fill up gave us some relief. And then the county, I think they could pull 3,500 gallons from their vac truck. We had pulled 3 loads from pump station 3 and discharged it back down at the wastewater plant in a course of about an hour and a half. And then the county got called out on an emergency and they had to take their vac truck. So they did provide some relief. I can't really quantify how much we didn't have any backups or discharges in the station 3 collection system. I can't quantify how full that was, if that, did help, alleviate what was going into the canal or not. But, conceivably they pulled about 10,000 gallons from pump station 3.
Back through all the board meetings, and by the way, if you drink a cup of coffee, if you ever decide you want to do that, and I may have missed one. It's possible I may have missed one, but when I looked at it, I was surprised that what we spend most of our time doing is talking about the wastewater treatment plant. That's where most of our time and most of our energy comes. I never saw, and again, maybe I missed one. I never saw any point where you specifically asked the board for some action that you thought might be helpful. Did I miss anything in looking through those board meeting recordings?
I had listed a review of the pump station controls, but not related to fixing pump station 4. I did not request.
Yeah, we're talking about is my understanding of that particular clip.
I'm sorry.
Action on our part specifically.
For pump station 4?
When we were talking about the electrical control panels, whatever it was, and I'll be honest, I don't know what a lot of that stuff is.
Yeah.
If there was never an ask of us, it was more of an update, is my understanding.
Yeah, I put under projects 1 month, and I got some, and Austin and Darren, we did discuss this during our last meeting with Darren, and we had discussed the pump station controls and looking at that as a project, or having them evaluated, because I requested, well, Darren asked me to put together a list of any spare pumps we need, and I got pricing from Hills for all the pump stations that we didn't have spare pumps for. And then we talked about.
There was any request that you made of the board. Is that an accurate statement?
That's an accurate statement. I had discussed with Darren and Austin, but I did not make a request of the board.
Any other questions? Sure. Mike, I guess that's all we had for now.
Okay.
We'll obviously be back in touch and we'll look forward to your final version of the root cause report.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, I'll get that as soon as I can.
Great. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you.
All right. We go to item 5, open forum, general discussion to update Lewes BPW COVID-19 policy.
Mayor, I was going to start one. So this policy, which is the one that I put in front of you, it's an ongoing policy that the city has updated. When this originally went through back at the start of the pandemic, we followed suit. This is just to bring it back in front of the board to follow what the city had enacted on back in June, I believe, or July. So all we're doing is following suit with what the city has done according to the policy, which talks only to how sick time is being utilized when someone comes down with it or is asked to stay home.
No, the city's gone through this with the Board of Health. Could you go through that, with what they said and what action you took?
Yes. So basically, Emery has announced to the city employees that the policy that's pretty much outlined here will be the policy going into effect on Monday, the 13th.
what I'm getting at, what did the Board of Health recommend to the
The
city?
Board of Health recommended we do everything we can to encourage people to get vaccinated, and that, there was discussion about how we would try to implement that. I think the plan at this point is pretty well outlined in here, that we're advising employees that they need to provide information about their vaccination status, and if they are not vaccinated, that they produce a COVID test that would indicating that they are not positive, and that would be required weekly going forward. And we also, working with BV, intend to offer a vaccination clinic either on site or at the hospital for people to be able to get vaccinated if they choose to.
Is the weekly testing, is that only for vaccinated or unvaccinated?
Vaccinated people.
Is that from the Board of Health? That was their recommendation? So there was no discussion of,
If they're asymptomatic, there was no requirement, or if there's no evidence of them having any symptoms, there was no requirement. If an employee is vaccinated and they have no symptoms of
Yes, if they're vaccinated. I'm surprised.
if they're vaccinated and they show no signs of or no symptoms, then there's no requirement that they retest.
So this is all in line with Delaware.
It's in line with what we worked out, with what we've discussed with Dr. Cowan, and as far as we know, and I believe it's in line with what the state is authorizing at this point.
from our employees, I would say that the only thing concern wise that for those that are unvaccinated is if you're testing those that are unvaccinated, vaccinated people can transmit it the same. So the question is, should you be testing everybody instead of those that are just unvaccinated? Just as a discussion topic.
We received 4 anonymous letters having concerns about the program. One was very similar to, I think, one that you received, the city received, and 3 others were basically some of the same concerns.
Are these from citizens or from employees?
So we understand from employees.
Okay.
So that, as Austin mentioned, the biggest concern of all of them seemed to be that if the unvaccinated are going to be tested, and since people that are vaccinated can potentially carry the virus, why wouldn't they be tested too? But did that come up in your discussion?
It did not come up in our discussion. And it was not something that Dr. Cowan, who's the chair of the Board of Health, felt was necessary, or mentioned at all, actually, I should say, rather than felt necessary.
I know when I go into the gym, I don't have to, I don't think, but I do. There's a little camera and it takes your temperature.
Mm-hmm.
Could we get something like that? And the people that are vaccinated would go through that process to make sure that their temperatures are low enough?
I believe the city has something similar on the wall.
We do have something on the wall already. It could be utilized. Yes,
Yeah.
sure.
That would be
A way to address the situation. Yeah. There's asymptomatic, yes.
I think it would be very good to have Dr. Cowan opine on the testing of vaccinated and non-vaccinated people, because, I mean, I know where this has been in the press quite a bit, and, it would help to alleviate maybe some of the concerns or provide a basis for why it is.
Okay. We can certainly ask Dr. Cowan for an opinion, or Dr. Tan.
Yeah, or
Yeah, okay.
Well, I sat down during the going away at retirement party for Bob, and there was strong opposition to getting the shots. Strong opposition, and I guess that's probably shown in those individual letters as well. And I actually reached out to 4 different prior board members just to ask what their perspectives are, what they thought, et cetera. And I won't go into, the actual text, but Jack Lesher told me that I could share this story. He said that, and he gave me the dates and times and all of that, but he said, if this can help, please share this story. He said, I went to the hospital, I think it was in March, prior to vaccines being available. He said, I was diagnosed with a brain aneurysm, bleeding of the brain, which is worse than strokes and those kinds of things. And he said that, the doctors truly believe that it was attributed to COVID. And the reality is, if he hadn't done that, I wouldn't be sitting on the board, or if vaccines were available, I wouldn't be sitting on the board. He would still be here. But he wanted me to share that story with everybody because of his strong belief in the vaccine. And I do understand individual choice. I really, really do. And I struggled with it, and I read a lot of articles, more than I read anything in a long time. But I've come to support this process, and I know that's not going to make a lot of people happy, but I really do in my heart. And I go and I visit my dad all the time, and I don't want to transmit something to him, and I would even use that scanner camera to make sure that my temperature wasn't elevated. That's after a lot of thought. That's kind of where I came out, and candidly a lot of research as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a medical person by a long stretch, but from what I hear and see, and seen, the Delaware Department of Health recommends this, that our city's Department of Health recommends this. Every doctor that I've come in contact with, either professionally or just casually, has recommended this. So I think I have no choice but to go along with it. And I think maybe that monitor to see the temperature as employee enters work would be a good thing.
Yeah.
Those are readily available, I believe now. Initially, they were hard to get.
Yeah.
But I think I've been to many places, First Aid Community Action, other places in Sussex County and up in Dover where those monitors are stationed at the doorway.
Yeah, I think that's another question though to ask Dr. Cowan or Tam, is the effectiveness of the temperature, because my understanding with the temperature is that it's a very, very cost-sieve versus the test, which is got a much higher accuracy. So
I'm not talking about not having people take the test. I'm just saying if someone had the vaccine, that they could go through the scanner so that people would know that their temperature is lower and more likely safe.
well, and as I say, I would think that the two questions for Dr. Cowan would be, is it appropriate for people who are vaccinated not to be tested because of what we know about it residing in the mucous membranes? And if so, is a temperature check, what's the effectiveness of a temperature check versus the nasal swabs?
Are we gonna, you're suggesting we wait then, not make a decision today?
This can always be revised down the line.
I would like I think we should move out on it.
I'm okay. I'm just saying that, to fine tune this and to address the concerns
Going forward.
going forward.
We can certainly, I think Dr. Tam or Dr. Cowan will be very responsive to these two questions. Not a problem.
And I think there's lots of literature out there. I just can't sort through.
Certainly is a lot of the literature, a lot of availability in the media. I get the concern. We have the same situation with city employees who want to get vaccinated or are concerned about getting vaccinated. I will tell you that, the city has had 4 members of our employees who have been out with COVID recently, one of whom was vaccinated, asymptomatic, and the other 3 were not vaccinated. So whatever.
We're such a small organization and so vulnerable. We don't have much backup to staff. It's a close-knit group. They enjoy each other for the most part. If someone did get it, they were out, or we lost them, which would be horrible, it would be devastating to the BPW. It could really be a major issue. So I think it's important that we do what we can to protect them and protect our ratepayers and other employees, both of the BPW and the city, to move forward with this.
Well, and Tom mentioned that it can be revised.
Sure.
I think we should put this into practice now And then with the caveat that we're going to look to make it better if we get more when we're going to look for more information.
If we want to add a screening every morning or daily or whatever, that can certainly be added.
So how do just curiosity, how do the swabs get done and where do they get done? Do they get done here and we send them out, or how does that work?
They're generally available. The hospital does them.
Okay.
You can also go to a Aspera and get them done, although they'll charge for you. There'll be a charge for those.
So the employees would have to go to the hospital once a week and just get it,
Or whatever they chose. They go to their own doctor's office.
yeah. But
And
show proof of it once a week.
the tests that BB uses are available within 3 to 4 hours. I know I've had them several times in the last couple of weeks.
Well, you look like a carrier.
We did this in conjunction with the community health nurses at BB as well.
Yeah.
And so they were in full support of the concept and fully supportive IE coming and doing a vaccination clinic here. So
And maybe we can even let people leave early 1 day a week or something, half hour, just to go and get the test done. I don't know.
this plan does not call for that.
Call for that. Okay. Stay in the same. Well, do we need a motion on this, Mike, or can we just be the sense of the board? How should we handle this?
If you are setting a policy, it should be via motion.
Do I have a motion?
Well, I'll make a motion that we accept the COVID-19 policy and also
Adopted by the city.
adapted by the city.
As revised, and adopted by the city.
And that we continue looking into ways to improve from a medical standpoint, the information that goes into the report.
That's the report updated September 9th.
Okay,
Is that correct?
yeah. Right.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 6, open forum general discussion of the Franklin Avenue Church parking lot project. Is this still alive for now? The last we talked, I thought we were going to hold off on it. So there's no need for us to take any action at this time.
Exactly. We're waiting for a little more information.
Okay.
Okay.
And I let GMB know that as well.
Yeah, I think that, it was presented as a possible item when we're looking to work the Schley Avenue, Schley Franklin Avenue and the parking lot over at Otis Smith Park, as this could be an alternate or another item to put into that. And based on other information that we have right now and that are yet unknown results, I think that this holding off on this is probably appropriate.
I'll wait for Tom to return.
That a little bit more context. The BPW was going to do this project in 2019, 2020. We secured an easement from the church to put in 14 parking spots. It was engineered. It was put out to bid, and the engineered estimate was about 50% of the cost of the actual construction estimate that had come in, or the construction bid. So we did not move forward with it at that time because it didn't make feasible financial sense. And so we kind of just stopped, and then it was brought back up as to include economies of scale in the bid for the Smith and Schley Avenue parking lot.
Yeah, and in order to address, and just for the public, in order to address the concern of the shortage of parking around this building, we are encouraging our employees to utilize the Franklin Schley parking lot during business hours so that the parking in front of the building and around the building is more readily accessible for those who might choose to visit for the meeting or whatever.
And we were going to use porous material over there. It was going to be like a space that both the employees for both organizations could utilize, customers could utilize, and then the church could utilize it for any sort of events they had.
And I guess at least you and I had discussed it informally as a good idea, but we never brought it to the board And
So it was discussed in your budget session. Darren talked about it when you got an estimate of what it was going to cost. And so I think at that point you just took no action on it. And but it had not been discussed with council. And so when Charlie brought it to a capital projects meeting, council said, well, what about this? And given some other things that we're hoping will work out, I think it's best that we just kind of wait and see how that plays out.
yeah, that's the reason we had it on the agenda initially, but since you've dropped it, then
Yeah.
we'll hold off.
I think if it were to go forward, I think since we both would benefit, I think it would be something that the city and the board would likely share as a cost development.
Mayor, do we have a meeting set up with you after your council meeting?
Next Tuesday morning,
Do we have something?
I think we set it up already. It's at 1:00. I think we moved it to, because of schedule conflicts, I think we moved it to Tuesday afternoon. I believe.
1 p.m.
That's what I have on my schedule. Yeah.
What was it for?
No, that's,
Just Anne Marie and Darren, or Anne Marie and Boss, and yeah, excuse me. I think
So it's what time? I'm sorry.
1:00.
On,
the 14th.
okay. All right. Item number 7, open forum, general discussion of the utility complex project. Austin, do you, well, I can mention it.
Well, the idea was looking at the whole utility complex down there, both city property and BPW property, and ways that we could gain efficiencies. Through that, we've created kind of a little subcommittee in a way with Tom and Richard, myself, we're working on coming up with some ideas that could better gain efficiency. GMB's involved, Anne Marie and the mayor are also involved. So that project's starting to kick off and gain some traction.
And I had mentioned to the mayor previously that I'd like to wait until October to meet with them so we can get our ducks in a row before we meet. We know what we think we'd like to do.
Yeah, we should probably, knowing that October is only 2.5 weeks away or 3 weeks away, we should probably get
Maybe I should go to the people that are going to be doing
we
it.
should probably try to get a date on the calendar, everybody's calendar.
I'll let you guys decide when you think you would have information to talk to the city about.
I didn't think it will take that long from what we discussed yesterday.
We're going to go through, take a look at what we have existing, how it's being utilized. Also what we would like to gain, areas that we feel maybe not utilized in any sort of capacity, meaning part of that, Chalet Avenue building. But we're going to discuss that amongst us and we'll have a meeting and kind of bring everything to the table.
Now you have an aerial photograph produced.
Yeah.
Has the city gotten that yet? Copy of that?
I've not seen it yet.
Why don't
Yeah.
we give a copy to them now so they can also do their.
Well,
We just
Charlie
got it.
said Charlie said he was going to.
If you shared it with Anne Marie, I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, so you should have that
We just
too.
need to get a hold of it.
Yeah.
Well, because, and he was going to go in.
Well, Charlie's on this call, so. No, he's now been asked to send it to us, so. Sure, you can bring him in. That'd be great.
Because we talked about annotating it also as to, and so he may be waiting to do
Okay.
that.
All right, let's see what he's got.
There he is. Hey, Charlie.
Hey,
Good morning.
Where were
Good
you
morning, everyone.
There, Charlie. Sorry. Did you hear that discussion, that brief discussion?
Yeah, and I'll get the aerial view over to Amory and Ted right away.
Thank you.
I was gonna say, base Anne Marie and Ted, you guys can go through and look at what you would like to gain through this process as well.
Perfect. No, that'd be helpful. I think
Yeah.
it'd be, look at it, and you look at it, and we come together with a meeting in October. That's good.
So one of the things that we had talked about yesterday was that we would put together a kind of like a requirements document of what we see for the future. And I think if the city does the same thing, then we can merge them and figure out how best to use that property back there.
Right. I think once you guys get your head into it, you should bring it back to the board
Oh, yeah.
to discuss. So that would put it at the end of the month.
End of this month.
And end of, are you gonna be ready by the end of this month to do that?
No,
So
And then you're gonna be gone most of October.
no, actually, I'm only gone for 2 weeks now,
Okay.
so,
All right.
and it's the last week in September, the first week in October.
Okay.
I canceled most of it,
so maybe have it our board meeting in October. So
which is,
The last of October.
7th.
It's the last of October.
Wow. Well, I guess the first is on a Friday this year.
Yeah. So if we're looking at, when we're looking at the first week in November
Yeah.
to meet.
well,
Anyway.
whatever you come up with.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I will give you your mayor and city council meeting on the 11th to discuss it also.
Yeah.
Item 8, open forum general discussion of the Lewes Waterfront Preserve Developers Agreement. Mike and Austin.
So, Mike, I was just gonna do a little quick synopsis and then you can kind of chime in. So we had met with Bob Sipple, answered all of his questions. I believe there were some changes.
You want to identify Bob Simple?
Bob Sipple is a developer for the Lewes Waterfront
Yeah.
Preserve. It was originally Joe Setting and then
Right.
that changed hands. There were some things that were changed, which were, high level things in the agreement. And he has some questions regarding the cost share. That's all been discussed. Bob is going to be coming in either today or later this week to execute. The BPW is going to be the last one to execute, and then we will send it to Mike and so forth. So when he comes in, he's going to be directed over to the city. He'll, come in with his escrow monies as well. And we should be good. Mike, did I do good?
Yeah, the only thing I would correct, and I had to go double check my notes as well because it all blends together. But the board had actually approved the Lewes Waterfront Preserve Agreement back in, I believe, June. The agreement itself has not changed. What was updated were the costs, since the exhibit that highlights unit costs and provides the cost estimate. Since that exhibit was originally prepared last fall, costs have increased. So that exhibit was updated. The formulas didn't change. The agreement didn't change. So we've had meetings to make sure everybody's clear in terms of what it requires. But since the board already approved the agreement, there's no action that needs to be taken here today. It's more of an FYI. It was also a placeholder in the event that we did need to change something. We don't. So we're happy to answer any questions.
So the number is what it is. These are just estimates, and it's going to be whatever the numbers come in.
It's correct. It's an actual cost contract.
Okay. All right. Anybody have any
Good policy.
Yep. Item 9, open forum general discussion of the MOU for the Donovan Smith Mobile Home Park Utility Project. Mike, I think you're on for that.
Yes, thank you. So this was also something that was approved by the board. This one I had to go a little bit deeper into my notes. This was last approved, I think, back in June of 2020, or at least summer of last year. Since the MOU, since the board approved the MOU was approved by DENREC and Department of Health and Social Services, Division of Public Health, DHSS. All of those groups approved the MOU. The delay since those organizations and entities approved the MOU was in getting the property owner, Donovan Smith Mobile Home Park property owner, to approve the MOU. And the complication there, as I understand it, is that the lender of the mortgage on the property needed to approve the execution of the MOU. That has taken some time. We do have counsel for the property owner on the line, should there be questions. But long story short, the lender has granted conditional approval for the owner to execute the MOU. They have requested through the property owner is requesting one change to Section 10. Section 10 of the MOU essentially provides that the costs and expenditures associated with the MOU. So from the property owner's standpoint, these are payment of the utility costs, payment of all of the items that are in the MOU, cannot form the basis of rent justification. It is currently drafted. And let me just so I'm precise here. Section 10 currently provides that during the funding period, the Donovan Smith Mobile Home MHP owner shall not utilize or otherwise rely upon directly or indirectly the utility improvements, loan interest, utility charges, sewer district capital improvement costs as defined in Section 14 herein, or any other cost or assessment contemplated herein as a basis for rent justification under Chapter 70, Subchapter 6, Title 25 of the Delaware Code or other applicable law. The question is that, or any other cost or assessment contemplated herein. The property owner has requested that that not be open-ended, that be revised to include specific defined terms like the terms prior to that. They've also requested that the heading be changed to read limits on rent justification. The bottom line is just to remind the board of the structure of this arrangement. The Board of Public Works will be getting a loan from DNREC and DHSS to cover the cost of construction. After construction is completed, the principal of that loan will be forgiven. As a condition of the loan forgiveness, the state has imposed a number of requirements on the property owner, and those are all spelled out in the MOU. Ultimately, the board is the middleman for purposes of acquiring the loan, completing the construction, connecting the utilities. It is the state that's setting the conditions in terms of restrictions on rent justification, restrictions on the obligation to pay for the utility charges and the like. Because they're the state's condition, at the end of the day, it's really up to the state as to whether they are okay with an open-ended term or whatever restrictions and requirements they're putting in the MOU. So my recommendation to the board is, should it be the will of the board here today, that the board reaffirm approval of the MOU, but also authorize and direct staff to work with DNREC and DHSS to revise the MOU and associated documents consistent with DNREC and DHSS conclusions as to the final conditions of the loan. At the end of the day, it's their conditions. We're the middleman. If DNREC and DHSS are comfortable with the requested change, I see no reason why the board wouldn't be. And that reaffirming and directing staff in that manner would allow us to go forward there. DNREC and DHSS are currently taking that request under advisement. They have said that they are going to talk about it internally, and they will let us know. So they don't have a conclusion there on that point. I don't think that prohibits the board from taking action. But the one other thing before I open it up to any questions, the MOU does contemplate easements. We need easements for the utilities. I think given that the bank is engaged, the lender is engaged at this time, I think it behooves us to draft that documentation now, get it in front of the bank and get the approval of the subordination of the mortgage to the easement now. So I would just ask that the board direct staff to prepare that easement documentation today as well. I have a motion that I can read when the board is ready to move forward. But that's a lot, but that is the background of where we stand.
Is there any discussion before the motion?
I would just point out that in addition to that, in addition to the things Mike's already outlined, this will then trigger them being annexed because it is a condition of all this arrangement. So
Finally.
Finally, yes. And we know that the residents out there are most anxious for this to occur.
We've heard that.
Yeah. So, and we as, you know, this has also, as we are aware, triggered a whole thing by the county and to get as many people or as many households as possible off of the septic systems that exist around our wellhead protection or your wellhead protection. So,
I know you and Mike has spent countless hours, well, he won't count it, but
it's over 4 years now.
many hours over many years getting to this point. So thank both of you for
No problem.
everything you've done. Any discussion before Mike reads it? Okay, Mike, could you read that motion?
Sure. So what I would recommend would be a motion to reaffirm approval of the memorandum of understanding with Donovan Smith, MHP, DENREC, and Delaware Department of Health and Social Services, Division of Public Health, and to authorize and direct staff to work with DENREC and DHSS to revise the MOU and associated documents consistent with DENREC and DHSS conclusions as to the final conditions of loan, as well as to direct staff to prepare easement documentation for related utilities.
Somebody want to make that motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Good luck. You're not home yet.
I think we're reliant at this point upon DENREC and getting it.
Item 10, open forum general discussion of acceptance of general manager's contract. This is something that should have been approved at our board meeting. The last one, I didn't have it on the agenda, and that's my fault. And therefore, I know it's going to be approved, but I'd like to ask that his salary be adjusted retroactively to the time of the meeting, our last meeting, because we should have approved it then.
Absolutely.
No, I mean, he hasn't done anything last month.
Bill up, Tom.
Just kidding.
So have a motion to accept it with that condition.
I make a motion that we accept the general manager's contract and approve it retroactive to last meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations formally. You got a contract.
Thank you. I
If you
appreciate
didn't
Thank
approve it, then we'd have to pay in time and material. My gosh, we'd be out of pocket.
Item 11, open forum general discussion to schedule Lewes BPW policy workshop. Earl?
Yeah, so we went through this before where we had a number of policies that have been kind of collected. My ask was people send that to me and I'd aggregate the list and those kind of things. I have been advised by counsel that may not be the best process to go through. So what I would ask is that, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong here, is that, read through those policies. And all they are is just, a headline. We can make it whatever we want in each of those policies, but look through those policies, decide if there's other ones that you want to enact or talk about. And then perhaps maybe send it to someone smart like Justin, who could put it into an Excel file for us and see where we have overlap, or Josh, I'm sorry, and where we don't. That may be an easier way to do it to keep me out, unless Mike, you think that should go through you for aggregation?
No, I think that's fine, Earl.
Okay. I think, when you look at what we just went through with the what do we?
Pump station?
No, not the pump station. Don't give me started on that one. But if you look at the policy that we just basically had reviewed and then updated from a prior meeting, having those kind of policies, whether it's with people who do construction or anything that we do, having those kind of policies makes our lives easier. It puts that DNA into the business to making sure that we're doing things in the right way. I think it's a very important meeting and a great opportunity for us to decide how we want to manage this process and this business going forward. So I'd ask you to look at what was sent out. I'll send it out again if you guys want to see it, go through it, kind of rack and stack. If you've got other ideas of policies you think we should consider, let's do that. And I'd like to get, scheduled as soon as possible, a meeting, a workshop to kind of go through them.
Can we try next 2 weeks, get everything to Josh?
I mean, if anybody doesn't, I'll just send it out to everybody.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be good. I think it makes Austin's job a lot easier, but have those policies to guide him as he makes decisions.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Do you want to say, to have everything by Josh by, say, the next board meeting, which is the 22nd, and then schedule a meeting at that board meeting on the 22nd?
All right. Can I? Sure. Would I add one more thing?
Yeah.
So when it comes to the rate study that was done, and I'm mindful in looking at, the things that we put in place for approval for projects, be it AMI and others that we'll all be working on. These costs seem to be going up rather extensively. So my concern is that as I look at the reserve policy and I look at what we've approved, I did not feel comfortable approving the reserve policy, knowing that these costs are going up so much. If we look at the recommendation that came from the rate study from Dawn, which is, I guess, 2 or 3 months at this point, she was recommending increases. I'd like the board, if we could, in that next meeting, to take action on what we want to do from a rate perspective. And I don't know the process that goes through that. I just know what Dawn took us through. But I also know, and I was looking back, and it was approved, I guess, in 2020 that we reduced our electrical costs by 4%. Because we were passing along the savings that we got, which is the right thing to do for our ratepayers. But we seem to be in a different situation now, as it certainly relates to what we're doing with our service provider over at the wastewater treatment plant, and with increased costs just in general in every place that we're kind of turning around and looking. So I'd really like us to think through that. And I don't know if that's a separate workshop, if it's part of the workshop, but really going through our expenses and seeing and going through the rate study and making decisions. That's a broad statement.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
When would we do that?
We're gonna do it together. We're gonna try to break it. Do you want it on, do you think it's reasonable to put it on the agenda? Or is that too big an item?
We'd have to
get into detail on it.
So really what would have to happen is we'd have to look at everything that was, put into the plan for expenses. Reassess, have those costs going up? My guess is probably yes. And just like we've got, Tom and I are going to work on the AMI and then bring that back for a vote. We need to decide what do we need to more research on? How do we approve this budget that we have for these line items that we have?
You're talking about operating budget.
Yeah, well, not just operating, I'm talking about the capital budget, sorry. So I'm not sure what the process is to do that, because there's a lot of moving pieces.
Sounds like a workshop might be the thing to do.
Well, if you're modifying all of that, then that throws off what was presented by Dawn.
Right.
Because what was presented by Dawn was off of everything was provided basically December of 2020 to January of 2021. That's what she based everything off of, and she presented.
So we should probably look at other projects that are within that window.
Yeah.
And that would be a smaller scope. But if her math is right, I have no reason to believe it's not. It could be wrong because our costs will actually be higher, certainly with a wastewater treatment plant. We just need to dial this in.
If you want to do it through a workshop, I can ask if Dawn can come back and go over that presentation again.
Is there a need for that?
No, or how about we
think so.
have the workshop and figure out what we need and come up with what's, what we need going forward, and then send it to Dawn. She might just be able to do a revision.
Yeah.
Well, is that workshop recorded anyway? No, isn't that Dawn's presentation recorded anyway?
It is. It is.
So anybody can look at it.
Yeah.
So I don't think you have to ever come back and do it again.
The only thing is if you have to update.
No, I'm talking about a workshop to do what Earl's talking about, bring not only up to January, but everything we've got thinking about going forward, bringing it all in and then deciding on how much of it we want to do and we don't. And whatever changes we've made, it goes to Dawn and she can plug it into her system and then get back to us.
I support that absolutely.
Okay.
I think we have to be careful about narrowing the window because we do know that we have large expenses down the line and we don't want to, we have to be mindful of our reserves at the end period. So, we can start that way, but if it looks like we're winding up with diminished reserves, knowing what we're going to be doing for the foreseeable future, we may have to broaden it.
Well, whatever's decided, like said at a workshop, and Dawn comes back to us, it's not carved in stone. We can always have another meeting and say, we've just found some new things out. We better get working on that. But it would be a place to start, that's all.
Yeah.
Why don't you prepare an agenda item for next month, for this month, I guess. Discuss this in more detail and just exactly what homework you want us to do in the interim.
That is an agenda item?
Yep. Well, we're getting ready to go into executive session in case anybody that's attending the meeting, I can open it up to anybody, the press, or I can't see from here who's. Yeah, if anybody has a question before we.
Andrew's
Do you
on.
want to mention about the county workshop to discuss with the wastewater treatment plant with Hans at the county?
I don't think we're ready for that yet.
Well, it's the discussion if we want to schedule a workshop with
That's
With Hans on
just
mutual
schedule a
aid.
workshop.
Mutual aid, bi-directional.
Can we do that since it's not on the agenda? Is it okay?
Well, I think it ties in. I know we passed it, but that number 4,
Yeah.
it's either that or I can bring it to the meeting on the 20th.
Yeah, let's plan. Okay, if we can bring that in, Mike, no problem.
Yeah, but all you're doing is setting a date for a future meeting that will be noticed in an agenda and publicly circulated.
All right. What is good for everyone?
Oh, no.
Are we talking about this month?
Yeah, I think so. When are you leaving town?
29th,
Most of the month.
26th, excuse me.
So what does, next week might be tight.
Next week's probably tight, and then you have the week of the board meeting.
All right. You want to do it before the board meeting, the 20th, the 21st?
The 20th is fine with me. The 21st, other than 11 to 1 is fine for me.
20th in the morning is no good for me.
Okay.
Now, remember, I got to run this by Hans too.
Yeah.
I'm real-
Are we open? Let's see if we're open. Let's give him some room to select.
21st is okay.
We can do the 20th in the afternoon or
Yeah.
21st all day. No, Mary?
No, morning is gone on the 21st.
So the afternoon of the 20th or the 21st?
Afternoon on the 21st right now is okay.
Yeah, either
Yeah,
one.
and the afternoon of the 21st would have to be after 1 o'clock.
After. So you want to check with him on those dates? And
And
get
if
back to us?
nothing works, I'll send emails around.
Yeah, okay.
If that doesn't work, it sounds like they're moving into October.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you for bringing
Okay, so
that up.
nobody's-
I put it on my calendar. I mean, I put it on my notes.
So did I, but I skipped over it.
I see no hands up from the audience there. So do I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
We'll mute your mics.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.